Hello, welcome back to the Wall of Unusual. I'm your host, Chris, the Keeper of the Unusual. And welcome back to part 2 of the Great Canadian Ghost Show, where me and Brenda have a lot more creepy and scary stories to tell you, and just in time for Halloween. So sit back, relax, grab a hot drink, and enjoy the stories. For my first story, I'd like to bring you back to Ontario. This story actually happened to me. Now, this story takes place in a place called Black Creek Pioneer Village. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's pretty much a pioneer reenactment place where you can go and see what it was like to live in the pioneer times. They have reenactors dressed in period clothing. They have houses on the property that are from that time, and they actually have the original house that was built by the family that actually settled the land, the Strong family. Now, every October they do ghost walks, and I was on such a walk. Now, the building we were in, the guide told us that this was the house of the priest. The man that lived here was a very devout and very strict man. She told us a story of how he was giving a sermon from the pulpit, and one day he saw a parishioner who was falling asleep. He stepped down from his pulpit, Bible in hand, walked up to the parishioner, and slapped him across the face with the Bible and said, "If you are not going to hear the word of God, you are certainly going to feel it." Now, as the guide was telling the story, I just so happened to look to my left, and there is a room that is cordoned off to visitors. You cannot go in there. It is the study. And I noticed a man in a brimmed hat standing there, looking in. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to spook our friends that we're with. I said to myself, you know what, maybe it's just a trick of my mind's playing tricks on me, or something that caused the outline of it, making me think someone's standing there. So after the guide finished her story, she's like, you guys can look around. As soon as she said that, I quickly went to this room, turned on the flashlight that I had, and looked around the whole entire room. No one was standing there. There was nothing that could cause a silhouette of a man in a brimmed hat. Nothing. I quickly didn't say anything. I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't until we took the ghost tour next year when a different guide told the same story. We were leaving this house. And I told her, I said, hey, I actually had an experience in this house. And I told her what happened. Her eyes widened and said, oh, him. He's actually been seen throughout the property, and we don't know who he is or why he's here. So that's my story of the man in the brimmed hat.
When people hear the name of the city of Calgary, they usually think of things like the Calgary Flames NHL hockey team or the Calgary Stampede, not ghosts. But there is a location in the city that has a history marred by tragedy from its early construction days, and it has earned the reputation of being a hub of supernatural activity for over a century. In 1875, Fort Calgary was established as the region's command post of the Northwest Mounted Police, which is now known as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP. Keeping order at this time was very difficult, since the area was populated with whiskey runners and outlaws. When the railroad was brought into the area, trade increased, and because of this, the city of Calgary started to grow around the fort. In 1906, the fort's superintendent, Captain Richard Dean, decided to have a home built for him and his wife Martha on the grounds of the fort. He thought that the existing accommodations were unfit for a family, but Martha, she would never see the inside of the house. She died from an illness shortly before the house could be completed. After the fort closed in 1914, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway purchased the land and tore down all the buildings but the Dean House. They moved the house to the southeast corner of the property where it became the station agent's living quarters. 15 years later, the house was purchased by an entrepreneur named C.L. Jacques. Now his plan was to use this building as a boarding house. To accomplish this, he had the house moved again to the other side of the Elbow River. It was then sold to Alex Brotherton, who continued to use this as a boarding house. But it was during the boarding house years that these walls seen many tragic events. In 1933, a 14-year-old boy ended his own life in the attic after being horribly bullied due to he had epilepsy. Then in 1952, a tenant by the name of Roderick Umperville stabbed and then strangled his wife Irma to death in front of his own children inside this house. He then took his own life. Then in 1968, owner Alex Brotherton passed away in this house, and all of this in combination cemented this building's reputation as one of Calgary's most haunted houses. In 2015, the Fort Calgary Historic Preservation Society redeveloped the gardens, the grounds, and updated the house. Soon afterwards, it became the location of a well-known restaurant and event venue. It is known as one of Calgary's most haunted spots, and for good reason. One famous story tells about an old telephone that occasionally rings, even though it's not connected and it has no interior wiring. Regularly, visitors claim to hear voices and footsteps when no one else is around, and they smell cigar smoke when no one is smoking. People also claim to hear an antique piano in the house play all by itself. Staff through the years have reported seeing dark apparitions that have no legs below the knee floating down the staircase before they disappear. But that's not all. In the attic, there are storage bins. These bins appear to be blood-stained, and no amount of scrubbing can take those stains away. But the most famous spirit is of an Indigenous man. He wears a long-sleeve shirt with a vest and has his hair in one single braid going down his back. This spirit seems to be a protector spirit, since he warns people that they should not be in the house since it's a sacred place. Now, considering how this place is now a fine dining restaurant and an event venue, I don't think that this is going to be happening anytime soon.
My next story comes from the Empress Hotel, located in Victoria, BC. Regarded as one of the most famous haunted hotels in all of Canada, and is actually a tourist attraction. Located near the harbour, where a lot of boats and yachts come in, and actually located around the legislative building itself. Now, one of the ghosts that call this hotel home is the ghost of the architect that helped build the hotel itself, Francis Rutenberger. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. He was a man that led a very scandalous life. Anywhere he went, scandal followed, until one day he was found murdered, bludgeoned to death with a carpenter's hammer. His teenage lover at the time was convicted of the murder, but to this day it is still a mystery on who actually committed the murder and what was the motive behind it. Now, guests and staff have reported seeing a dapper gentleman wearing a cane and top hat walking up and down the stairs of the hotel. Some say that he came back to the hotel to hear guests marvel at the architect that he once built. He's actually also built the legislative building that is located around the hotel. Another ghost that calls the hotel home is a ghost maid of Emily. She is seen on the 6th floor, reportedly, continuing her day, continuing her routine. Now, she met a very tragic end, where one day after she did her routine, she decided to take her break like she usually does on the fire escape. But no one told her the fire escape was removed. As soon as she stepped out, she plummeted to her death and met a very tragic end. Some say they still actually see her in her maid uniform continuing her day. Another ghost that actually calls the hotel home too is a ghost of a little girl that is seen running around the lobby. When guests or staff walk up to the girl and say, "Hey, where are your parents? Let me help you find them." The little girl laughs at them and runs away and disappears. And my last ghost that I'll be talking about that comes from this hotel is a ghost of an elderly woman that is seen roaming around the hallways. One night you'll be sleeping and all of a sudden you hear a knock at your door. You open your door to see an old lady there. She'll ask, "Hey, I am lost. Can you help me find my room?" If you are brave enough to do so, she'll lead you to the elevator, and all of a sudden she'll disappear. Now, staff have said that this lady actually stayed in a hotel and actually died of natural causes. But the room that she stayed in was demolished and made room for elevators in the hotel. Again, this is a very famous haunted hotel in Canada. If you stay the night, you might actually have your own ghost story to tell.
There is a ghost story that has been told in the province of New Brunswick for hundreds of years, and this tale is about a ghost ship. What makes this story different from other ghost ship stories is that this ship is on fire, burning for all eternity. There are many different local variations of this story, But for today, I will tell you one of the most popular. The year was somewhere around 1500, and Canada was not Canada yet. It was in the very early days of Europeans exploring the New World, and that is exactly what Portuguese explorer Gaspar Cote Riel was doing. He had left his homeland with 3 ships, and with the goal to find the fabled Northwest Passage. After weeks at sea, Gaspar and his crew finally saw land. They reached the shore and started to explore the area where they stumbled upon the local indigenous people. The indigenous people thought the meeting went very well. The locals were very interested in trading with Gaspar, but he quickly realized that the indigenous people did not have the silks that China had. They also didn't have the spices that India had, and this is when he realized that he wasn't in Asia like he thought he was. So, to try to recoup the money that he lost going to the wrong side of the planet, Gaspar decided to kidnap 57 indigenous people so he could take them back to Portugal and sell them as slaves. But before he did this, Gaspar decided that he wanted to look around a bit. He sent his other 2 ships home, while he and the crew of the boat that he was on did more exploring. What Gaspar didn't know was that the local indigenous people wanted revenge, and they were tracking his ship. When they least expected it, the indigenous warriors attacked the ship. They took Gaspar off and tied him to a rock at low tide. He watched as his crew tried to escape, but as they did, the ship caught fire. They were all killed, and so was Gaspar when the tide came in. Today, people still claim that they see this ship burning in the bay. It is said, as the crew tried to escape the flames, they vowed to haunt this bay until the end of time.
My next story comes from Winnipeg, Manitoba, from the Fort Garry Hotel. Now, like the other hotel I mentioned in my other story, this is actually one of Canada's haunted hotels too. It's home to many ghosts, but the one room I'll be concentrating on for this story is room 202. Now, according to legend, room 202 was once occupied by a pair of newlyweds. They were enjoying their honeymoon until the bride had a headache. So the husband decided, hey, I'm going to go out and get some medicine for you. As he left and it was on his way back to the hotel, he got into a horrible car accident and died. The bride, stricken in grief, decided she couldn't live with him anymore and decided to join him in the afterlife. Now, people that have stayed in room 202 have experienced a lot of weird things. Ghost hunters have gone there and done investigations, but the most strangest things, one, to me, was a video that was floating around. A couple of friends staying in that room, when one of them found a piece of paper behind a mirror, they started freaking out, and they unraveled it. And they found more pieces of paper of all the sightings that people have wrote down and kept in that room that they have said they have experienced. One of them was a couple saw a butler, well-dressed butler, roaming up and down the halls, holding a silver tray in broad daylight, and all of a sudden, he would disappear into thin air. Now, those of you who try to find any newspaper articles or stories about this tragic tale that happened in room 202 won't, because there is none. Ghost hunters have tried to find any historical evidence of this and they can't find it. But yet, people that have stayed in room 202 have always said they either woken up and seen strange shadow figures at the foot of their bed, or felt someone get to bed with them if they're alone. Even heard strange knockings around the room, things that moved on their own. But, if you don't believe me, why not be brave and book a stay at Fort Garry Hotel and book room 202? Who knows? You yourself might have a ghost story to tell after your stay.
If you drive half an hour south of the city of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, you will find the tiny village of St. Louis. This community runs along the southern shore of the South Saskatchewan River, and they boast not only that they are the hometown of 2 NHL hockey players, they are also the home to one of Canada's best-known ghost stories. This story is so famous that Canada Post decided to feature it on one of their stamps. For around 100 years, thrill seekers have flocked to an area about 5 miles or 8 kilometers outside of town. They all park their vehicles under the night sky, and they wait in hopes to see the legendary St. Louis ghost light. Hundreds of people through the years have claimed to see this apparition, and many of these are in groups who all see the same thing. This ghost light is said to appear without fail almost every single night. All witnesses describe seeing the same thing. The first is a large and bright light that resembles a headlight of an oncoming train. It glides down the area of an old railroad track, usually in a northerly direction. As it gets closer, it gets brighter before it vanishes. Now the second light is smaller than the first. It's a small orb-like light that is usually a soft red or orange tone that seems to hover in the air and move erratically over the tracks. Most often, these lights are seen together floating down the old tracks of the railway bed that used to be an active set of tracks for the Canadian National Railway. These tracks were abandoned in 1983, with the ties and rails being removed in 1988. But even before this, the legend about these tracks was being told. Local lore says that on one cold winter night in the 1920s, a train conductor was doing a routine track inspection. A horrible accident occurred when the man was hit by a passing train, which resulted in him losing his head. Ever since that night, the St. Louis ghost light appears over the tracks where the man lost his life. It is believed that the large light is the ghostly light of the train, and the reddish-orange one is the haunting light of the lantern that is carried by the spirit of the man who was killed. He is said to return every single night looking for his missing head. The railway's records do not go far back enough to confirm this story, but that doesn't matter to the hundreds that travel to this area in hopes of seeing this phenomena for themselves. This story has been featured in many different books, media reports, and it was also featured on the original Unsolved Mysteries TV show. But is it really a ghost, or maybe is it something else? There have been many attempted explanations for this life, including diffraction, which is, in this example, would be car lights passing through some sort of small opening nearby the tracks, and this would cause the light to diffuse and expand in size. This theory still hasn't been proven, and because of that, people are still telling the story about the railway worker who is looking for his head to this day. The Mackenzie River is part of the Canadian Boreal Forest. Along with the Slave, Peace, and Finlay rivers, these rivers form the longest river system in Canada. It flows through a vast and thinly populated area in the Northwest Territories, and its shores has been the home to various Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. But another thing that the Mackenzie River is known for is one of the oldest ghost stories in Canada. This story starts back in 1853 with a man named Augustus Richard Piers. Augustus was only 33 years old when he died unexpectedly. He worked for the Hudson's Bay Company out of Fort McPherson, which sat near the Mackenzie River. He often spoke about how if something would happen to him, he did not want his final resting spot to be at this fort. Knowing Augustus's wishes, a man named Roderick McFarlane volunteered to bring Augustus in his coffin on the long journey back home by dog sled. In his journal, Roderick described what happened on this journey, and his tale is still being told today. Roderick claimed that on multiple occasions, his dogs would surround the sled and bark frantically. This was because they seemed to know that they had to protect Roderick's precious cargo. So when the dogs would do this, Roderick would hear a voice commanding the dogs to start running, and the command did not come from either Roderick or his traveling companion. After the precious cargo was dropped off, Roderick and his traveling companion decided to get some sleep. Their exhaustion quickly left them when suddenly they felt a ghostly presence in their room. This filled them with such terror that neither one of them could speak. Was the spirit of Augustus ordering the dogs to protect his body? Was he the ghostly presence in his friend's room? That is something that we'll never know. But today, this story of the Mackenzie River Ghost is a tale that people still tell around campfires across the country.
Hey guys, hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I had a lot of fun making it. Don't forget, Brenda will be dropping her episode on her feed, so don't forget to check her podcast out. I'll leave the link in the show notes. Also, I keep forgetting this. You can leave comments on my Spotify page now, so if you have any trip tips or suggestions about the show, or even just want to leave a comment for a future episode, let me know. Now it's time for my unusual fact of the day. This has to do with Star Wars and Halloween costumes, which is kind of fitting since it's actually Halloween. Now, when the movie Star Wars first came out, they thought it was going to be a major flop. Suppliers for Halloween costumes said, okay, we don't need that much stock. It's going to be a failure. It's not going to go anywhere. We'll be fine. They were wrong. Star Wars was a huge hit. It got to the point where every single store was sold out of Halloween costume, and the suppliers themselves had a hard time replenishing the stock for these stores. Even the company that was making knockoff Halloween costumes said that if I had 1,000 units, I can't fulfill the orders that I need to fulfill. So even then, it was a hard time replenishing and even trying to even fulfill them, to the point where people were like, you know what, we're going to make our own Star Wars costumes. So it was pretty neat. People figured out a way to made the pilots, even make their own lightsabers. It was pretty cool. So that's my unusual fact of the day, and hope you guys enjoyed this spooky cross-Canada tour of ghost stories. And don't forget to stay unusual, my friends.